The morning mist clung to the valley floor like a living thing, weaving between ancient oaks and towering pines as young Finn made his way through the forest. At 12 years old, he was small for his age, with wild brown hair that refused to be tamed and eyes the color of autumn chestnuts. His worn leather satchel bounced against his hip as he walked, filled with herbs and mushrooms he'd gathered for his grandmother's remedies. The village of Thornbrook lay 2 miles behind him, nestled at the forest's edge where farmers tilled their fields and blacksmiths hammered at their anvils, blissfully unaware of the deeper magic that dwelled in the ancient woods. Finn, however, had always been drawn to these depths, much to his grandmother's dismay. She would warn him of wolves and bears, of bandits and worse things that lurked in shadows. But Finn felt safer among the trees than he ever did in the village, where the other children mocked his small stature and gentle nature. He was humming an old tune his mother had taught him, before the fever took her 3 winters past, when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong in the natural symphony of the forest. A high-pitched keening, like metal scraping against stone, mixed with something that sounded distressingly like crying. Finn froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. Every instinct told him to run, to race back to the safety of Thornbrook. But that crying, it sounded young. Frightened, lost, against his better judgment, Finn crept toward the sound, pushing through a thick curtain of wild ferns. The keening grew louder, more desperate, and as he rounded a massive boulder covered in emerald moss, he stopped dead in his tracks. Two creatures huddled in a small clearing, no larger than house cats, though Finn knew with absolute certainty they would not remain that size for long. Their scales shimmered even in the weak morning light, one a deep sapphire blue that seemed to contain entire oceans, the other a vibrant ruby red that flickered like living flame. Their eyes were large and luminescent, filled with an intelligence that took Finn's breath away. Leathery wings, still too small for flight, were folded against their serpentine bodies. Dragons. Finn had heard the stories, of course. Every child in Thornbrook had grown up on tales of the great WIRMS that once ruled the skies, before the old kings had driven them to extinction, or so everyone believed. These creatures before him were supposed to be nothing more than legend. Yet here they were, real and trembling and utterly terrified. The blue one, Finn decided it was female from the more delicate bone structure of her face, was trying to comfort her brother, pressing her scaled snout against his neck. The red dragon was injured. Finn could see the cruel metal teeth of a hunter's trap clamped around his small hind leg, blood seeping from where the steel bit into soft flesh. "Oh, you poor things," Finn whispered, slowly lowering himself to his knees. The dragon's head snapped toward him, their keening silencing instantly. For a moment, boy and dragons simply stared at each other, each assessing the threat the other posed. Then the blue dragon did something that would change Finn's life forever. She stepped forward, placing herself between her injured brother and the human boy, and she spoke directly into his mind. "Please, help him. Please." The voice was young, crystalline, layered with harmonics that no human throat could produce. It resonated not in his ears but in the very center of his being, and Finn knew with absolute certainty that he would do anything to help these creatures. "I'll help," he said aloud, keeping his voice soft and steady. "But you have to trust me. That trap needs to come off, and it's going to hurt." He spent the next hour working as carefully as he could, using a fallen branch as leverage to pry open the trap's jaws, while the red dragon, his name was Ember, his sister had told Finn, while hers was Mist, bit down on a stick to muffle his cries. Tears streamed down Finn's face as he worked, feeling every ounce of the dragon's pain as if it were his own. When the trap finally released with a rusty shriek, Finn immediately set to cleaning and bandaging the wound with supplies from his satchel. "There," he said gently, tying off the last strip of cloth he'd torn from his own shirt. "That should hold until it heals. You're very brave, Ember." The red dragon regarded him with golden eyes that seemed far too old for such a young creature, then carefully extended his neck and pressed his scaled forehead against Finn's chest, right over his heart. Warmth flooded through the boy, and he understood. This was how dragons said thank you. "Where's your mother?" Finn asked, looking around the clearing. "You two are too young to be out here alone." Mist's voice entered his mind again, this time tinged with fear and sadness. Men came, with nets and fire sticks. Mother told us to run. We ran. She fought them. We don't know where she is. Finn's blood ran cold. Dragon hunters. He'd heard whispers of them in the village. Men who sought the remaining dragons for their scales, their bones, their blood, all worth fortunes in the black markets of the eastern cities. If they'd attacked a mother dragon and survived, they'd be coming back to search for her young. You can't stay here, Finn said urgently. Those men will return. Come with me. There's a cave system in the deep woods near the Silver Falls. My grandmother showed it to me once. You'll be safe there. You would do this? Mist asked, wonder coloring her mental voice. You would hide us from your own kind. Your own kind don't set traps for scared children, Finn replied firmly. Dragon or not, you need help, and I'm not about to let anyone hurt you. Now come on, we need to move. The journey took most of the day. Ember couldn't walk properly on his injured leg, so Finn fashioned a sling from his satchel and carried him, the young dragon's surprising weight making his shoulders ache. Mist walked alongside them, her head constantly swiveling to watch for danger, occasionally humming a strange, melodic sound that seemed to calm her brother. They were a mile from the caves when the hunters found them. Well, a gruff voice called from behind them. What have we here? A boy playing with lizards. Finn spun around to find 3 men emerging from the trees, each armed with crossbows and wicked-looking blades. The leader was a massive brute with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw, his teeth blackened and broken. His companions looked no better, rough men who had clearly chosen a life outside the law. Those dragons are worth more gold than you'll see in your lifetime, boy, Scarface continued, grinning unpleasantly. Hand them over, and maybe we'll let you walk away with all your fingers. Finn's mind raced. He couldn't fight 3 grown men. He couldn't outrun them, not while carrying Ember. His hand slipped to the small knife at his belt, meant for cutting herbs, not defending against killers, and he knew it would be useless. No, he said, his voice steady despite his terror. He pulled Ember closer to his chest and felt Mist press against his legs. You'll have to go through me. The hunters laughed, but their laughter died as Mist began to sing. It wasn't the keening from before or the humming she'd done during their journey. This was something primal, something that resonated with the very bones of the earth. The sound rose from deep in her chest, gaining power and complexity, and Finn felt the air around them begin to shimmer. What's the little pest doing? One of the hunters muttered nervously, raising his crossbow. Before he could fire, the forest exploded with movement that a shadow fell across the clearing, so vast that the hunters looked up in horror. The trees bent and cracked as something immense descended from the sky, and Finn found himself staring at a creature of impossible majesty. The mother dragon was magnificent beyond words. Her scales were a blend of midnight blue and deep crimson, swirling together like sunset over the ocean. She was easily the size of a merchant's house, her wings spanning the entire clearing when fully extended. But it was her eyes, ancient, intelligent, and burning with protective fury, that made the hunters drop their weapons and run screaming into the forest. Children. Her voice filled Finn's mind, vast and warm and ineffably loving. My precious, precious children. Mist and Ember cried out in joy, and Finn carefully set Ember down so the young dragon could limp toward his mother. She lowered her great head, examining each of them carefully, her relief palpable even to Finn's human senses. Then she turned her attention to the boy. Finn stood frozen, suddenly aware of how small and fragile he was compared to this ancient being. She could incinerate him with a single breath. She could crush him with one claw. Instead, she lowered her massive head until her eye was level with his face, and he saw his own reflection in that golden orb. A small, scared boy who had somehow found the courage to protect creatures everyone told him were monsters. You saved my children, she said, and her voice was filled with wonder. A human child, barely more than a hatchling himself, stood against hunters and would have died to protect dragons. What? Because, Finn said, finding his voice at last, it was the right thing to do. They needed help. It didn't matter what they were. The dragon was silent for a long moment, and Finn could feel her mind touching his, reading the truth of his words, seeing the loneliness he carried, the kindness that others in the village saw as weakness, The love he'd given so freely to creatures he'd only just met. "I am called Aurelia," she said finally. "I am of the line of the Star-Crowned, one of the last of my kind. The world of humans has no place for dragons anymore. We hide in the deep places, the forgotten places, waiting for a time that may never come. But you, Finn of Thornbrook, you have shown me that perhaps not all humans have forgotten the old ways." She paused, and Finn felt something shift in the air around them, like the moment before lightning strikes. "And why children love you," Aurelia continued. "I can see it in their hearts, feel it in their bond with you. And I sense in you a soul that belongs not to the village of stone and iron, but to the wild places, to the sky and storm, and the ancient magic that once bound our kinds together." The great dragon's eyes seemed to glow brighter, and when she spoke again, her voice resonated with power and promise. "That I offer you a choice, young one. Return to your village, to your grandmother and your people, and live a human life, long perhaps, but bound to the earth. Or come with us, fly with us, learn the ways of dragons, speak the language of wind and flame, see the world as we see it. I cannot make you one of us. Your form will remain human, but I can give you a place among us, a home in the sky, a family who will treasure you as you have treasured my children." Finn's heart hammered in his chest. Images flashed through his mind: his grandmother's worried face, the cottage with its herb garden, the village where he'd never quite belonged. Then other images, soaring through clouds, sleeping under stars on a dragon's warm back, learning secrets that humans had forgotten, belonging to something greater than himself. "My grandmother," he whispered. "I can't just leave her. She's all I have." "She is wise, your grandmother," Aurelia said gently. "She knows the old ways. I have watched her gathering moonbell and dragon's breath at the proper times, seen her leave offerings at the standing stones. If you wish, you may say farewell. You may visit her when the seasons turn. But know that if you choose to fly with us, you choose a path that will change you in ways you cannot yet imagine." Finn looked at Mist and Ember, saw the hope shining in their luminescent eyes, felt the warmth of their affection wrapping around his heart. He thought of all the times he'd felt too small, too weak, too different. He thought of his mother's last words to him: "Find where you belong, my darling boy. Don't let anyone tell you where that is." "I need to tell my grandmother," he said finally. "I need to say goodbye properly." But after that, he looked up at Aurelia, and for the first time in years, he felt something that had been missing from his life. He felt certain. "After that, if you'll have me, I would be honored to fly with you." The dragon's rumbling purr was like distant thunder, full of approval and satisfaction. "Then we shall wait for you at the Silver Falls, young one. Take your time. Say your goodbyes. And when you return to us, you return not as a lost child of men, but as a member of my flight, my family, my home." Finn did go back to Thornbrook that evening, though he felt like a different person making the journey. His grandmother took one look at his face and knew something profound had changed. "You found them," she said simply. It wasn't a question. "You knew?" Finn asked, astonished. "I've been leaving signs for Aurelia for months, hoping she'd take her flight deeper into the forest, away from the hunter's usual paths. I knew her children had been born. The spring flowers bloomed in colors they hadn't shown in decades." She cupped his face in her weathered hands. "And I knew, my darling boy, that if you ever met them, they would see what I see: a heart too pure for this harsh world, a spirit that belongs to wilder, freer places." Tears streamed down Finn's cheeks. "Will you be all right? Without me?" "Oh, my dear child." She laughed, though her own eyes were wet. "I'll be more than all right. I'll be proud. I'll be honored to tell anyone who asks that my grandson flies with dragons. And when you visit, and you will visit, you can tell me of all the wonders you've seen." He stayed that night, sleeping in his small bed one last time, surrounded by the familiar smells of dried herbs and wood smoke. In the morning, he packed a small bag with a few precious belongings: his mother's silver locket, a book of pressed flowers, a warm cloak his grandmother insisted he take to the edge of the forest. His grandmother embraced him one final time. "Remember," she whispered, "courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing kindness even when you're terrified. That's what you did for those dragons, and that's who you'll always be, no matter how high you fly." The journey back to the Silver Falls felt like walking between two worlds. With each step, Finn felt the weight of his old life falling away and the promise of his new one drawing nearer. When he finally emerged into the clearing by the waterfalls, 3 dragons waited for him. Aurelia magnificent in the morning light, and Mist and Ember already prancing with excitement. "You came back," Mist sang in his mind, pure joy in every note. That of course he did, Ember added, his injury already healing with dragon speed. "He's ours now." Aurelia lowered her wing, creating a ramp of scales and membrane. "Are you ready, little one? Ready to leave the ground behind and learn what it means to touch the sky?" Finn took a deep breath, thought of his mother's words one last time, and climbed onto the dragon's back. Mist and Ember immediately nestled on either side of him, warm and solid and real. "I'm ready," he said, and with a push of her powerful legs, Aurelia launched them into the air. Finn's stomach dropped as the ground fell away, and then they were rising, soaring, flying through clouds that felt like cool silk against his skin. The world spread out below them, the forest, the village, the mountains beyond, and Finn understood for the first time what it meant to be truly free. He had been a small, lonely boy in a village where he didn't belong. Now, held safe between dragon twins and carried by their ancient mother, he was something else entirely. He was family. He was protected. He was home. As they flew higher, Finn threw his head back and laughed. The sound carried away on the wind, and 3 dragons sang with him, a song of belonging, of courage, of a human boy who had been brave enough to protect those who were different and had found, in return, exactly where he was meant to be. In the years to come, there would be tales told in Thornbrook of a young man who rode the winds on the back of dragons, who learned their ancient language and shared their secrets. But those stories would never capture the simple truth of it, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose compassion, and sometimes, when you protect others, you find that they protect something in you too. Finn had saved 2 lost dragon twins, and in return, their mother had given him wings.